Hey, Victoria, how are you? It's been a very long time since I've been back on the podcast.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, Kevin, because it's the final episode of the season. You finally made it back, and you've made it into our fabulous new studio as well.
Can you believe it? I mean, we actually have a place where I don't have to leave the office and go to record a podcast. I could just come upstairs. It's beautiful in here.
While you were busy doing other things, I sat down with Terry Schussler from Deutsche Telekom to talk about the concept of spatial computing and what it really is and how it's different from the metaverse.
So I'm really jealous you got a chance to talk to Terry without me, but I'm back now.
So given that you weren't here for the conversation, let's go into the discussion and listen to it, and we can come back afterwards and you can let me know what you think.
Sounds good.
This week, and for the final episode of this season, we're joined by a very special guest who was actually, and he'll be highly embarrassed about this, introduced to me by a mutual acquaintance as the King of Innovation. So, Terry, thank you so much for joining us. Maybe you can explain to us why you are the King of Innovation.
That's a little unfair, but I can give some background to myself. So I have been a self-taught programmer since the age of 12, and over my career I've worked on about 200 different software applications, but either programming, designing, architecting, and I've kind of covered a lot of different areas of software, from utility software to educational software to word processing, spreadsheets, databases, AI, multimedia, you name it. And I think what really has driven my career the most is that I have been very enabled and motivated by changes in technology. And I've kind of worked off of sort of 5-year arcs of technology paradigm shifts, and tried to innovate on top of those new technologies, new user experiences, new functionality that benefits people in their daily lives or with their communication goals. I call myself an entrepreneur. The combination of wanting to, create innovative business and do so using sort of nascent technologies, that's always been really a driver for me.
We asked you to come and talk to us about Apple Vision Pro and about spatial computing, because there's been a lot of discussion about spatial computing, and I think a lot of people don't understand how spatial computing is different from what they've seen in terms of AR and VR and the metaverse. And is this just a marketing term on Apple's part, or is it actually something different? Can you give us a bit of background into what spatial computing is? What are the technologies that really enable spatial computing?
Sure. So, first of all, you sort of have to understand, Apple didn't define spatial computing, but their focus is to educate people on the context and meaning of it. But generally, spatial computing is the idea of human interaction with a machine, where the machine maintains references to real-world objects and locations and can manipulate them. And so an example of that would be that I'm in a room and I'm looking with my device at a door, and I can change the color or the texture of the door, digitally overlaying the actual door with a render. So that's a form of referencing the door as it spatially exists in front of me, and then enable me to manipulate the appearance of that door by digitally overlaying on top of what I see with my eyes. I think what enables spatial computing first and foremost is being able to understand the real world location the user's in. So spatial mapping, understanding the geometry of the room that you're in or the physical location you're in outdoors. Further, getting into the details of that, understanding what kind of objects are around you, where's the table, where's the door, where's the window, where's the floor, are some basics, but getting into a more nuanced thing of recognizing a vase that's sitting on top of a table, or a paper that's sitting on top of a coffee table, for example, or an animal that's moving around on the floor of your apartment as you're sitting on your couch using your spatial computing device. So spatial mapping and object tracking and object identification are very key elements to enable this machine understanding of the real world. And then on top of that, we start layering in the ability for us to use our human body as our machine interface. So the human machine interface is my hands, my voice, my eyes, my head, the physical location of my head and where I'm turning my eyes to look at. And all of these things can be worked with individually, the same way that when we are working with a computer, we can use either the keyboard or the mouse. But in the case of spatial computing, the real goal is to enable this to be a fluid blending of different forms of human machine interface. So I can speak about something and I can point at it, and I can combine the two of those things together. So you can imagine I point at the door and I say, make that magenta. And now the machine knows what my finger's pointing at, it knows what that is, and then further allows me to then manipulate it contextually because it knows what the word magenta is and it has a context. Oh, what you want to do is paint the door the color magenta. And so those things are really important aspects of the foundation of what enables a spatial computing experience.
Okay, so how does the concept of spatial computing fit into sort of what we know traditionally as AR and VR? Is it an evolution of it? Is it an expansion of it? Or is it something different?
Traditionally, VR is mostly not concerning itself with where you are at all. It's the idea that you're putting yourself into a virtual environment that's completely surrounding you, and the context of where you are has very little to do with the experience that you're having in virtual reality. Yes, there's some awareness that needs to be made for where your couch and your TV set and other things are so you don't physically interact with them and hurt yourself. But for the most part, the awareness of the environment is relatively a low importance element of the virtual reality experience.
Yeah.
On the other end, when you talk about augmented reality, on the most simplistic level was the idea of what smart glasses were, which is that I'm wearing a display in front of my eyes, and that display can digitally present some content. But the content is just like a little screen hanging in front of my eye. There's no context to the real world at all. It doesn't know about the room I'm in. It doesn't know what I'm looking at. It's just providing information at my eye tips, if you will, as compared to my fingertips. And that's the idea of sort of a portable information display that you can have wearable on your head that you can use while you're hands-free interacting with other things. I think what spatial computing does is blends the best of both of those environments and adds the layering of being able to understand and bring in the context of the real world, automatically understanding the spatial environment that you're in, the physicality. Where's your couch? Where's your table? Where's your keyboard? Where's your mouse? Where's your computer? Where are the other things in the room that might be relevant to the computing experience that you want to have? And being able to personalize the user experience because it has the context of your room, your location, and the objects that are around you. So that's a big differential with traditional computing, is that spatial computing allows contextualization and personalization of the user experience to a great level, and then further allowing my interaction with whatever I'm seeing digitally or in the real world to be blending my body as the interaction device, my hands and my eyes and my speech become much more fluid methods of interacting with the things that I see and the things that I want to accomplish.
So if we move on to the Vision Pro, in your mind, what makes that unique as a device?
Well, I mean, it certainly does the best job that I've seen to date in terms of the baseline of spatial mapping and human interaction models, right? So that's one of the things that I described as like a key differentiation for spatial computing over traditional computing. And so the level of immersion that you get when you put the device on and being able to still see the real world and have a context that it looks the same as you would if you didn't have the device on, that's super important because that removes a lot of the sort of mental and literally visual friction that gets created with other types of augmented reality devices. The eye tracking is a super key example of how important multimodal interaction becomes because it's automatic. I just look around and automatically my gaze is tracked to a level of accuracy and performance that is magical, right?
Yeah.
It just knows where you're looking. That enables incredibly performant, once you get used to it, and it only takes a little while, an incredibly performant interaction model. I can interact with certain interfaces more efficiently by just looking and tapping my forefingers together quickly than I can with a keyboard trying to, rapidly, figure, or a mouse, trying to find and move a pointer and click a button. So I think these performance gains are really significant, and removing friction from the user experience was, like, I think, a key bar raise that Apple did in bringing the Vision Pro to the market. I can pretty concretely say that I don't know very, very many people that have experienced the Apple Vision Pro and said, "Oh, that was a terrible experience." The only thing I usually hear as a complaint is the price point. But when you get to the actual experience and the value of that experience, uniformly people appreciate that reduction of friction, the automatic aspects of it. And I think that is a big difference. The other really big one that can't be underplayed is that most of the other augmented reality, virtual reality platforms are silos that are kind of new. And with the exception of, say, the Quest platform, most of them don't have a large library of applications and functions that you can lean into to get value out of the device. So a lot of people in the early days of using augmented reality were using very clear return on investment, sort of B2B applications like field support and things like that, because they would just literally buy the device for that one application. Whereas I think what Apple's offering is a computing platform that you can use, thousands of applications on.
It was interesting because it was one of the things that I think, if we're talking to people about how they use it in the enterprise, it's really one of those things where you say you have to try it to really understand how this is a business device as well, because
Sure.
It's great for immersive environments and 3D movies and all the rest of it, and practicing your presentations in front of a dummy audience. All of that's great. But actually, this happened with the iPhone as well, didn't it? Everyone's like, well, it's a consumer device. It does all of these things. And then you start to realize that it's removing the friction from your business activities with the not having to switch from one device to the other. And suddenly you're getting into, it makes your employees more effective. So they have more flexibility. I found it fascinating because when we talk through the use cases, a lot of the use cases are ones where people say, yeah, great use case, but I can do that with something cheaper.
Sure. And there are definitely, arguments to be made for lower cost products, but then there's the compromise that, or many compromises that you may be making, which over time are worth money to you because they're either going to slow you down, or they're going to make you more fatigued, or they're going to literally not allow you to do something that you would want to do otherwise. And so, yeah, you have to pay a lot for the Apple Vision Pro, but I really would say you get what you pay for in that regards, and you get to learn what it's going to be like when there's more devices that are capable of delivering that level of spatial computing experience.
Hey there, We Got Your Mac listeners. Did you know SHI has another podcast? I'm Ed McNamara, the host of Innovation Heroes, a podcast that shines a light on the businesses and individuals leading the charge to solve what's next. It's hard to believe it's been almost 5 years since we launched. Along the way, we've met some incredible heroes, from C-suite leaders of the world's largest tech brands to elite tacticians taking down cybersecurity threats. Last season, I even had the pleasure of sitting down with the inventor of the barcode. And now, we're back with a brand new season. Season 6 is here, featuring 12 all-new episodes released every 2 weeks. Innovation Heroes isn't just another tech show. It's a platform for today's business leaders to get inspired and gain insights from real-life digital heroes. Don't miss out. Search for Innovation Heroes wherever you get your podcasts, or watch full video episodes on YouTube.
So when we're thinking about, these enterprise use cases, and for me, that seamless interaction was the thing that made sense. Are there any industries where you see there being a particular benefit for users with that use of spatial computing in general, or because Vision Pros at the moment, what they've got, they're only access to it anyway. But is there anything where you see that this is really going to potentially revolutionize those industries?
100%. I think one of the big ones is data visualization. Whenever you are looking at data in a 2D screen, you're losing a lot of intrinsic knowledge transfer in terms of what does that data really mean, and being able to manipulate the view that you have, your point of view of that data to see things on a third dimension or even a fourth or fifth dimension. And it's really difficult for some people to conceive of that working through a 2D screen. Even a lot of people have a hard time even thinking three-dimensionally. So being able to actually experience, a graph, for example, as a 3D object that you can rotate and manipulate and traverse spatially is very, very important to get insights into information that you wouldn't otherwise easily be able to do that. I think of stock market graphs and complicated sort of data charts that show complex data sets with multiple axes of information. It becomes very valuable. And so the ability to actually realize that content in a three-dimensional manner and then interact with it three-dimensionally, pull it apart, rotate it, scale it, in really kind of visually make it easier for you to process what you're seeing is super important for a lot of enterprise use cases. I think the other one that really comes to mind is collaboration. I mean, the ability, and this is where a lot of the more high-end headsets have always sort of targeted is virtual collaboration and data visualization within that, looking at sort of design review and looking at complex machinery or construction, the automotive industry, things like that are they need the resolution, they need the detail, and they need the ability for people to interact spatially with each other, even if they're remote. And so I think that becomes really an interesting foundation for Apple because they have SharePlay technology that sits underneath this, the scenes across iOS, iPad OS, and Vision OS, and that enables a lot of fluid collaboration interaction models between devices and between users. So I think those, to me, are like really, really important. But then you also have to look at the value of the real world. So those you could see without knowing about the real world. You could do those in a VR environment, right? But when you're looking at real world context, now being able to do things like simulate interaction with physical machinery to guide somebody as an operator or to learn how to maintain a piece of physical equipment, and being able to, in a nuanced way, guide the user to interact with control knobs and switches and dials on a real world machine becomes a really good example of the value of knowing more than just where the floor, the wall, and the ceiling is spatially, but actually getting into the nuances of the surfaces, of the geometry of the objects in front of you. If you're trying to guide somebody in repairing a piece of machinery, you need to be able to point out a specific hose or a wire or a connection. You need to know where those are, and you need to be able to visually and sort of holographically guide the user to how to properly interact, and even track their hand and then guide them to correct physical interactions. Those are really, really powerful ways to speed up learning curves and reduce error. And a lot of the bigger corporate investment in AR and VR has been all about returning investment by reducing error and speeding up educational curves for people to accomplish tasks. And so that's really where the real world value of spatial computing is, just to lean in.
Now, obviously, the other big topic at the moment is generative AI. So Where is that intersection between AI and spatial computing?
It's huge. I describe AI as the oil for the machinery of XR, spatial computing. And, we're only seeing very little nuanced elements of it. There's a lot of AI already at work. Even to, if you look at like the algorithms that are used to do eye tracking, there's massive amount of AI models related to that, so there's AI everywhere in many ways. AI is an umbrella term for about 50 different classes of technology. I personally have been working in AI for about 40 years. So, I've everything from expert systems to neural nets to, induction systems. I mean, there's so many different ways to look at AI. And generally, the idea of AI is some sort of augmented way to automate intelligence, right, or simulated intelligence. So there's the Gen AI, which is making content using AI technologies. And I think that's coming to bear very quickly, allowing a user to verbally or type in a request for an image to be generated based on a description or a prompt. Is a simplistic sample of what's possible. right?
Yeah.
So in fact, the entire environment, we have really amazing, 3D environments that you can experience in the Apple Vision Pro that are handcrafted by artists and stuff like that. But that could be completely generated on the fly based on user interaction. So if you start thinking about that, that means that you could not require bespoke applications be built to accomplish certain tasks. You can allow for the personalization to come into play and more fluidly allow the user to customize their work environment in the spatial computing and also just accomplishing the tasks that they want to perform in terms of content creation. And so the writing tools, for example, that's in Apple Intelligence comes to play just as easily and significantly in a spatial computing environment as they do on the phone, and image generation. But I think there's a lot more to that. Being able to generate music, being able to generate speech, being able to generate entire environments, 3D objects on the fly. And we see the early stages of this coming to the table now.
Yeah, I guess there's been a lot of hype around generative AI, and I think that's partly because it's fine. It's really the end user accessible, understandable, usable face of AI, isn't it? It's it doesn't require you to understand the algorithm in order to be
That's
able to use it. So it's AI for everybody kind of thing.
Yeah.
It is now seen as something that everybody can have access to, even though it's been hanging around them for ages in some form or another.
That's right. And I think there's so many very powerful examples of what could be more leveraged in a spatial computing environment. I used the example of pointing at an object and saying, make that magenta earlier. That concept was based on an MIT project from 1981 called Put That There. And so literally, if I were to point at and say, put that there, and use my hand versus my eyes as the interaction device, being able to do that, accomplish that in a spatial environment is very valuable. It's efficient. Make that 50% bigger. Turn that object in the upper right corner to blue. Being able to interact with the environment of an application or a window or an object by using both or all of your interaction models, your speech, your eyes, and your hand tracking is going to be a huge step forward to enable efficiencies. And I think if you really think about it, what gets really interesting to me is the ability to use natural language interface to control an app that I don't have expertise in. So for example, if I were to bring up, a word processor application I'm not familiar with, or maybe it is one I'm familiar with, but there's a feature that I've never used. I don't even know if it has a feature, but I'm going to try to get the word processor to create make a party invite using the content of this document. Like, I don't even know if it can make a party invite, but I'm going to try. And so if I can start to control applications using those kind of interactions, I'm not using modal dialogues and buttons and clicks. And my eye tracking is less relevant there. It's now more about the enablement of AI to allow me to translate my intent to an action and to get a result. And it's not a prompt in the sense of generating an image or generating text. It's not a content generation prompt. It's an action generating prompt. And this becomes a big step forward for spatial computing.
It sounds like there is an awful lot of exciting opportunity coming up as we start to see wider adoption, as we start to see people going beyond the testing and starting to deploy Apple Vision Pro and potentially other spatial computing devices within the enterprise as well as in the consumer space. What are the advancements that you see that will take spatial computing, which everybody else is only just getting their heads around, to the next level?
Well, I mean, clearly the example I just gave to me is a big one, but we have to look at the practicality. These things are going to get rolled out incrementally because explaining and then educating somebody on multimodal interaction, the potential of it, even the availability of it, is a huge learning curve unto itself. While people talk about multimodal, they don't talk about it being concurrent. It's like, I can use my eyes, I can use my fingers, I can use my mouse, I can use my keyboard, but I'm not doing all of those at the same time. And that's a curve of learning that users are going to have to go through to trust that the system will react in a way that makes sense to them logically. The same way, to be frank, that Apple has a challenge in the past with Siri not being, very productive at recognizing the intent of a user and delivering on an action. There's a getting people to lean into voice interaction and trust that it's going to give them a result. That's going to require just removing all those friction points that they've had in the past, and rewarding them with the surprise and delight that it actually worked and even worked better than they thought. And so I think features that surprise and delight people are going to be the things that come to the table first. The Gen AI stuff, the efficiency stuff, making things more efficient in like reviewing my email messages by looking at the sort of listing that I see in my mailbox, and having, as it provides today, Apple Intelligence generates a sort of automatic AI summary of the email. So it's not just grabbing the first sentence or two of the email, but it's actually making an intelligent summary and presenting that to you. So that's an efficiency, because now I can find that the emails that are more important to me without having to write rules and get into the nuances of searching my email, right? So I think when it relates to applications, being able to allow applications to interoperate more fluidly, and you brought up the idea of being able to have multiple apps running concurrently. We do have a contextual limitation of sort of shared and full volume space interaction models with the Vision Pro, where a lot of apps take over the entire environment, and then you're in that app and only that app. And sometimes that makes sense if it's an entertainment app. For example, I don't really want the other things to be visually present, but I can switch to them anytime. But I think when it comes to sort of the transition of the desktop metaphor, where I have lots of windows open and to the point where people have so many apps running that there's even, the space manager, and there's tools for coordinating, organizing that, being able to automate that organization and then present things logically to the user when it contextually makes sense, making it more personalized to what's commonly the set of apps that they want to work with together. Those are going to really make a big difference moving forward. So I think bringing the power of Apple Intelligence to the Apple Vision Pro is going to be a game changer for a lot of stuff.
Well, it sounds like we're on a very exciting journey now with spatial computing, with Apple Vision Pro, and with all of the innovation that hopefully those are going to enable. I know that you're probably going to be a lot less surprised by the things that happen than perhaps the majority of us are, because, as you said, you've probably seen some of these things already and know what they are and are just waiting for people to actually make them happen at scale. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's been really great to talk, and I hope to talk to you again sometime soon.
My pleasure. I appreciate the opportunity to share my thinking with you, and I hope you have a great day.
Now that you've heard that, what were your key takeaways? I mean, I was so excited with the whole thing. I know Scott's had to remove vast amounts of the content because Terry and I went down a few little rabbit holes on things.
Yeah, I want to hear what's on the cutting room floor. I mean, it was such a power-packed episode of Terry just kind of giving us, his view of how long it took actually the technology that we see today to mature. Like, this isn't new, right? Spatial computing, augmented reality, AI, these things have been around for a decade more.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just they get to that point where suddenly they burst onto the public consciousness as something new and exciting. And all those people who've been slogging away at them for decades are like, well, this isn't anything new. But for the rest of us, it is. It's new and it's really exciting.
Yeah, it's shocking to see how far we've come. And I think it is a mix of software or code, the right sort of head-mounted display or hardware that makes this a possibility for the enterprise now. Until then, I think we had piece parts, but we didn't bake the cake. We had the recipe, but we didn't get the end result.
It's just a really interesting place for us to end the season, because to me, it's talking about something amazing that's happened in terms of changes in technology very recently. And we're looking forward, and the rate of change is just phenomenal. What are we going to see in the next few months? We've had spatial internet and we've had AI in the last year that have really changed the way we use technology massively.
Yeah, the fact that you're able to just strap an iPhone to your face that you can see through and still use as a computer is shocking enough. But when we get to, and I use generative AI a ton, But when those two concepts, those two categories have a baby, and we're able to speak into existence what we want to visualize on a head-mounted display, I think that's kind of the next thing that we should get excited about. I heard on a couple episodes, Victoria, you're talking about TLAs, and what does a TLA mean? Is that an abbreviation? And
it's a 3-letter acronym.
Oh my God, you created an acronym for acronyms?
I didn't create an acronym for acronyms. That's the term TLA has been around for ages. But actually, one of the things that we have for our listeners on the We Got Your Mac website, Kevin, is a downloadable sheet explaining a lot of Apple TLAs.
The acronyms.
Yeah, or acronyms. Thanks for coming back, even if it was for the last episode of the season, Kevin. So that concludes season 2 of We Got Your Mac. It's been a fantastic journey, and I personally have learnt an awful lot. I'd like to thank all of our guests for coming to talk to us, and I'd like to thank our sponsors for supporting us. If you're interested in catching up on previous episodes, reading the blog posts, or downloading the resources for the episodes, including that document we talked about which explains the Apple TLAs, then you can find them on wegotyourmac.com. And as always, thank you so much for listening.